You're listening to the Survivor Sweat Podcast with Mike Buckmiller and Russell Rosenblum. If you're looking for strategy articles and just about everything Survivor, head to survivorsweat.com. Now, let's get to it.
Welcome back, Survivor Sweat Pod, Week 5. Wow, another favorite team goes down.
Yep.
This time taking 110 Circa Survivors with them. The Jets.
Well, I thought we had the Jets. Oh, no, that was last week.
Yes.
Never mind, I got that wrong.
Hey, we were going to take them one of 2 weeks.
We were. We actually thought they'd be loaded up on a ton this week, and that's why we took them last week. But
yeah. Well, we're back in the Simply Vegas studio here.
we are.
There we go. My name is Mike Buckmiller. This is Russell Rosenblum. We are the 2022-23 Circa Survivor champions under the Jed 4 entry name. And guess what?
What's that?
Jed 4 is still alive.
That's what I hear.
Man, not many people are alive. It's been the year of carnage, and it continues with the $14.266 million take-all contest.
Yep.
Unreal. Week 4 recap, 162 hit the skids. There is 480 out of 14,266. 96.6% of the pool has been eliminated through week 4. And finally, my friend, all the picks were entered this week.
Yeah, I saw. That's too bad. That's kind of the edge I look for in this thing, just the no picks.
After the 70 combined in the first 3 weeks, I'm happy. I was happy to hear that they all made it through. So fantastic. Made it through being entered. Not everybody made it through.
Right.
No.
They survived through Saturday at 4.
Yes. Last year, after 4 weeks, 25.7% of the pool has survived. So we're approximately 22.3% ahead of last year's pace. What were your biggest takeaways from week 4?
You know, it's the same thing. It's the NFL. You just can't rely on any of these teams to actually win a game, right?
Incredible.
I mean, the Jets, it looked like Aaron Rodgers was finally moving the ball last week. Like the Jets could actually score points. And suddenly they decided they could not score points.
No, it was unreal. They had many opportunities, just couldn't get it through, couldn't punch it. Field goals come back to haunt you. Next thing you know, you're in a low-scoring game against the Broncos, which Broncos were kind of a tough story for us last year. Tough for a few people this year.
That's for sure.
Incredible.
Now, the other thing we talked about a lot in conjunction with a lot of these games, coaching matters. You know, maybe people don't think it does. Just the talent on the field, coaching matters. And there were some really bizarre play calls, clock management, all through the entire week. And there are every year, every week. It's just it's always frustrating when you're, you know, the victim of it. You look at the Falcons game, for example, where there were some questionable decisions near the end as well. And the Falcons ultimately won, but it probably should not have come down to where it did.
Yeah. Tough game. We had a little bit on the old Dirty Birds there.
Indeed we did.
Man, sweated that one out.
And I know a good friend of ours, he thinks the Falcons are still, like even money to make the NFC Championship game or something like that. And if they lose that game on Sunday, they won't win the division. Probably they'll be so far behind the division, losing to New Orleans there, and then being that game back, and also or a couple of games back, losing the tiebreaker, having lost the game at home. I mean, it's just a disaster for them. Now they get to look up and go, they'll be results oriented. Well, we won. It's all good.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of holes in that team. There's a lot of problems over there.
Yeah, I felt it was a little odd that only 3.3% was on the Texans.
Yeah, me too. I thought this would be another week that people might find the Texans.
Yeah. At the end, the value fell with the Texans and the Bengals.
Yep.
I mean, I can empathize with not wanting to take the Bengals. So maybe that drew some of the percentages onto the Jets. I mean,
I'm sure it did. Look, we had some Bengals. We initially planned on having more Bengals than we didn't for the same reason as everybody else. The Bengals were initially projected to be fairly highly taken a few weeks back, and then as they're 0-3 heading into that game, they just did not have a lot of confidence from the public anymore.
Didn't have confidence in me.
That's true.
We went back and forth a few times about how many picks or a pick, or if not.
Correct.
having them as one of our entries.
Correct.
We ended up landing with, what did we land with? I think we landed with one on them.
Something
One
like
or
that.
two?
One or two.
Yeah,
Can't
for
recall,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after the fact, you're like, why don't we take more Bengals?
Well, of course, because they won.
Yeah, of course.
But you did talk me out of Cleveland. Not that I really wanted to take Cleveland, but you did. You were pretty emphatic. We're not taking any side of that game. It was
We
a
are
disaster.
not taking any side of that game. That was just an absolutely, I mean, there's no, not that you have confidence in all the other teams at this point, but there's just no way. You don't know what team's going to show up on both sides of the ball there.
I don't quite understand how the Raiders beat the Ravens. I watched the game. I'm still not quite sure how it happened. Otherwise, I think the Raiders have been fairly consistent.
Yeah. Consistently bad.
Consistent, yes.
Yeah, of course. So last week at 4 o'clock, when the rosters locked there, not the rosters, but the actual entries locked,
Yep.
We expected the 49ers to be the chalk, attracting between 30 and 40%. They actually creeped above that 40% up into the 43. Not too surprising. A little bit more than I anticipated.
It's because
than we
everyone feared the
anticipated.
Bengals, right? If the Bengals, the
Sure.
Niners still may have been the chalk, but with the Bengals,
Sure. We figured the Jets would be around 20%. 28% had an opportunity to take them. They landed at 17%. We were happy to see them go down, obviously. Sorry for those of you that got clipped. The Texans, we thought they would be between 12 and 18%, way off there. That's where the value ended up.
For sure.
And if we would have known that 3% would have been on them,
We'd have been on 'em.
We would have been on them for sure. Now, watching the game, I was like, I'm glad we didn't know.
Of course.
But they ended up pulling that out for sure. And then the Bengals, we thought 5 to 10%, right in that range. But it's just tough. It's tough to gauge where the public is when they've just wiped out so many Circa Survivors. Where are they going to land in that?
yeah, it does. And we're going to circle back to that when we discuss this week later. You've got 43% that made it through with San Francisco, so that's a minimum of 43%. Well, slightly different because you've got some people knocked out, but a large chunk that doesn't have them anymore,
Yeah.
plus people that used them before.
Of course.
And they're a great spot this week, too. I don't know how many will end up taking them, though, because I don't know how many still have them.
Yeah, and we anticipated some Chiefs. I know they're at that bottleneck. They're in both the special weekends, but that most likely the public won't be on them, and you can maybe slide them through. Now,
Right.
They were in a tough contest. They lose Rice there with the knee. Tough battle. For a minute, they looked like they were in trouble as well.
Yeah, but it begs the question of what they're now going to look like. And again, if you're saving them going forward, you've now got a team that's missing a couple wide receivers. Now, Rice is, still think, not questionable for this week, but they're not sure if he's out for the season or not. If it turns out he's out for the season, they've got some offensive problems. They got Mahomes. He seems to always find a way to win. But you could be saving this team for a week where they have nobody healthy.
I hear there's a wide receiver that may be on the market.
It's what I hear.
How would you trade in a division like that?
I can't. We're talking about Devontae Adams. For those of you who can't figure it out.
Devontae Adams.
I was hoping he'd get traded over to Survivor Sweat. We could have him on the pod. I don't think we could pay him enough. We're going to have a lot more transactions.
No.
But, I can understand his frustration over there. But from what I understand, he also loves living in Vegas. So it's probably a tough decision. I don't think it's an easy decision for him.
No. So we landed on the 49ers. We pushed that button. We also had some Bengals, and we had the Dirty Birds. So we survived.
We did survive.
And, week 5 is going to be an issue.
We knew this a few weeks ago. Excuse me. We looked at this a few weeks ago about week 5, and it was going to be an issue then. And I think we haven't really moved ahead to week 5 yet, so I'll save it until you direct me to go to break and we come back.
Yeah, thanks for following directions.
I don't do it very well. It just happened to hit me.
So last year's Circa Survivor.
All right, so week 5. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
So look back at last year's Circa Survivor champion, Jack's Jags. They had 6 entries left. They laid the wood on the Niners. They advanced. Congratulations. So we still have last year's champion involved. Alex Browna, who was co-champions the year we were there. He has 1 entry left. He also has the 49ers. If there's any other former champions out there, please reach out, inform us, let us know. Love to track your path and how things are going. So please feel free to reach out and let us know, hey, man, we're still in this thing. So,
or if you're not in, but you're kind of over it and you're willing to come on and talk about what happened, your strategy, and how it didn't work out. Happy to hear from you as well.
Absolutely. Always love to talk to the former champions, for sure. So that is it for week 4. I'm excited to move. Not really excited, but I really want to talk about week 5
It's going to be interesting.
after the break.
Missing out on the biggest sports contest of the year just because you're not in Las Vegas? Now there's a solution with Survivor Sweat. Play from anywhere in the Circa Millions, Circa Survivor, or any of the biggest sports contests with America's first secondary marketplace to buy and sell contest entries. Buy an entry in the marketplace and then submit your picks each week into the contest using our preferred proxy partners. Make a deep run in a winner-take-all contest? Sell any piece of your Survivor entry in the Survivor Sweat secondary marketplace. Set your price, stake, and pick control status, and buyers can join the action from anywhere. Buyers can even resell their stake if the entry increases in value. Think of it as an eBay for sports contests. Now's your chance to win over $16 million. To learn more, visit survivorsweat.com and get started today.
All right, welcome back. We are going to discuss this week 5. Where in the heck are people going to land?
Seattle. I mean, I'd say Seattle or San Francisco, and that's still true, except we know a ton of people used San Francisco last week, and those are the most people that got through the week at San Francisco, so they don't have San Francisco anymore. Then you've got people that had used them before. I haven't taken a look. I'm sure you can dig it up. How many actually even have San Francisco available?
So here we go. The San Francisco 49ers have 40.4% availability for...
And they're going to have lots of really good weeks in the future. Mm-hmm. And what does Seattle have for availability?
57.1%.
With some good weeks, but not many. I mean, the only thing tricky with Seattle is if you have the chutzpah to save them for, was it Christmas?
Mm-hmm.
Where they were underdogs and they finally flipped the favorite, I think, at Chicago.
Yeah.
But it's one of your only chances to use Seattle realistically. But again, if you're going to have that big a percentage of the field on them, this is going to be that same debate we've had in the past where typically you're going to get 30% plus on Seattle through the universe of survivor pools. But it seems with the people remaining in Circa, they could be a little bit sharper, and it's possible that they pull back. So if you knew suddenly that number went from 34% to 28%, I still don't really like taking them, but if you knew it went from 34% to 16% or something, then you actually have a ton of value in taking them.
Yeah.
As big a favorite as they are.
If you want to let us know, please tell us then we can take them.
Exactly. If we can get a couple hundred people, let us know which way they're going. That'd be helpful.
Yeah, so if you have some Niners, you might land there. Seahawks, I mean, do you just push the button and go through with those 57%?
This is the thing. Of course you can. Let's just say, for example, you just believe they're going to win, whatever, right? Of course, every team can lose, but you believe they're going to win. So you're clicking the button to say, I just want to advance. But in fairness, that's probably what you did last week with San Francisco.
True.
Like, I know everyone's going to take them. I'm just clicking the button because I'm going to advance. And in fairness, that's what the people did the first 3 weeks with the Bengals. I'm just clicking the button because I know I'm going to advance. And then they didn't advance, right? So, again, it's the same thing. And I know I keep beating the poor dead horse down there. But yes, most of the time you're going to win with any of these teams. I mean, you're rarely taking an underdog, right? You're going to win most of the time. Problem is, when you win taking somebody that's incredibly popular, you don't make a lot of headway against the field.
True.
When you win with somebody not that popular, if the popular team loses, you make a ton of headway with the field. So, but there's no question it's a tough week. I think we had a friend mention last week. He said, the thing is, you've got the good teams are playing other good teams, and the bad teams are playing other bad teams. Yeah. So you don't have a lot of really big favorites this week.
Yeah, only 2 teams with a 70+% win rate. You got the Niners over the Cardinals at 76%. You got the Seahawks versus the Giants at 71%. You creep down a bit. Here comes the Chiefs again. I mean, do you gamble with the Chiefs here? And I mean, again, looking forward to those special holiday weeks.
They have special weeks. It's an incredibly banged up Chiefs team. I mean, Rashee Rice is not playing this week.
Of course.
So an incredibly banged up Chiefs team. Third biggest favorite this week.
And the Saints have shown their game.
They have, although they were banged up last week. I don't know what their health status is moving in. But, yeah, it's interesting. You could be saving the Chiefs for one of those special weeks, but they may be just as banged up or worse.
Yeah. You can also go down just a little bit there. You got the Chicago Bears.
See, this is the thing. Initially, it looked like Chicago was going to be the favorite this week. And I remember when we talked about this around week 2, we had said, this is great because everyone seems to want Chicago in week 5. We'll just take Seattle. And now nobody really wants Chicago. I mean, we said at the time we didn't want any piece of Chicago. As we've said before, let's assume you're going to have to win the whole season to get this thing. So you got to assume you're going to need 20 spots. So that means, there are 12 teams that you will not take. So you've got to think about that as you're looking at these teams going, I hate this team, I'm never taking this team. Okay, well, you can do that. You can figure out 12 of them that you will never take, right? I could probably name 25 that I would hope that I could never take, right?
Correct.
So, but very high on that list or low on that list, depending on your perspective, are teams like Chicago, there are teams like Carolina. I mean, these are teams I don't ever want to have to take in a Survivor matchup. I guess if you're going to take Chicago, you may as well take them at home against Carolina, or you can save them when they're at home against New England. But, I mean, you're never going to feel like super warm and fuzzy about either of those games. Or, of course, you can take them in the special week where they're basically 50-50 against Seattle. And if you don't use them, you may have to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you could be looking at a weird situation where I find it almost impossible to happen, especially Kansas City is already, 4-0. But if really with their offense in shambles, they've got to, well, they have one tough game coming up at San Francisco. Then they get to play the Raiders in Vegas. They get I think they call that the bye week.
Not for the Browns.
They got to play Tampa. That's true. Tampa, but then they get Denver. You got Buffalo's a tough game. Carolina. I mean, they got some soft games there, but it does make you wonder at some point, will they either be so far ahead or anybody else gets beaten up? Who knows? Or do they trade for Devontae and you've got Mahomes with Devontae sitting there on Christmas Day, which would be pretty massive.
Unreal.
But it could just go either way. You just don't know.
Speaking of the Browns, you got the Commanders. -3 at home against the Browns. I mean, geez, we talked about it last week. Look at Daniels. Look at
phenomenal.
the offense.
Phenomenal. We talked last week, like, we could plausibly take the Commanders last week, just this last week past. But, of course, we didn't really have the stones to do it. But now you look and say, okay, now they're a team. They used to be in one of those, 12 teams you don't think you're going to take. Mm-hmm. Now they're one of the teams you do believe you're going to take, one of the 20 teams you're going to believe you're going to take. But I think like a lot of people, everyone's still sort of looking, saying, all right, I'd like to get a little more confidence. Like maybe the first couple of games are fluky. The third, like against the Giants, they didn't look particularly great against a bad team. They won, but they didn't look great. But they've looked stellar basically since then. So,
well, if the Commanders don't wet your whistle, you got the Packers at Rams, Vikings, Jets over the pond. How about the old Jaguars versus the Colts? Maybe that's a spot.
Sure.
Wait, aren't the Jaguars the only winless team?
I know, and they're favored, and that says something about the Colts who burned us in, I think it was week 1.
Maybe the Broncos at home versus the bye week Raiders.
In fairness, the Broncos have barely burned us this year, so it's time. I think we owe them a selection. No, I don't know. The Raiders look like a mess. The Broncos don't look great, but they're well coached, and again, coaching matters. You've got to think that they've been improving this year. And so we'll see. I mean, they've had a couple of decent showings the last couple of weeks. So again, you look at last week's game and against the Jets, and does that mean the Broncos are good? Or does it mean the Jets just aren't? What does it mean? Like, it's hard to look at that game in a vacuum and go, wow, the Broncos have turned it around.
Unreal.
I mean, they scored, 9 points?
They did beat the Bucs the week before.
And they scored more than 9 that week.
Yes, they did.
And the Jets do have a good defense.
If you want to just take a game and not sweat it and just don't want to watch it,
then just do the no pick.
No.
There's no sweat.
Well, this could be a no pick, but take the
no pick, no sweat.
The Patriots at home versus the old Dolphins.
Yeah, when you say old Dolphins, is Marino coming back? How old can we go?
No, he's not walking.
Maybe Bob
through.
Greasy?
Yeah, super duper. No, of course. But there is...
Patriots aren't going to be favored in too many games this year.
Little fun fact here, 113 entries do not have the top 2 selections available to pick.
Do you mean they don't have either of them, or they don't have...
They do not have either the Niners or the Seahawks to choose from. So they will be on some of those teams that we've discussed.
Well, they're going to have to be.
Well, they can no pick.
Well, that's one of the ones we discussed.
No, don't no pick. Get it in there.
No pick, no pick.
Yes, of course. Speaking of sweat.
Actually, if you're going to no pick, you should just sell your pick.
Yes.
You should sell your entry.
There you go. Nice entry.
I think that is better than the no pick.
Head over to SurvivorSweat.com, the one-stop shop for all things Circa Survivor Contest.
Are there any listings? Because last year at this time, there were like very few. Do we have any this year?
Last week was on fire. 68 total listings, 175 verified offers, 54 sales.
It's amazing.
The lowest percentage sold was 1%. 99 with the highest, so nice variance there. The average equity value of the sale was $31,840.
So it's interesting because we had a couple of people even just this morning that are pretty sharp in the space, and they had differing opinions as to what we're going to see in pricing, right? So one person noted, hey, this could be your last chance to buy a quote-unquote affordable entry. And somebody else said, yeah, but they're selling at markups to what par would be if you wait another week, and if San Francisco and Seattle, or even realistically, if either one of them lose, suddenly the numbers are going to get very expensive, and you might get discounts to par. And it begs the question of, would you rather pay, I'm making up rough numbers here. Would you rather pay $35,000 for an entry with a par value of 30, 28, right? Or would you rather pay $85,000 for an entry that has a par of 100? Right now, the value junkies out there certainly would rather pay 85 for the one that has 100, and I think most people would say they'd rather pay 85 for the one that has, so that's worth 100. But I think there are fewer people that have 85 than have 30.
True.
Even if you have a couple of partners, you have 3 partners, it's 10 grand each. If you're going 10 grand each, you now need to find 9 partners. So I think you're going to start seeing not just a shift in, and you've already seen the markups drop. Last week they were 2 to 3x. This week some of the listings are about 1.5. And of course, you can make an offer if you think the price is too high. But I think you're going to start seeing a shift in the pricing in terms of relative to par value. But I think you're also going to start to see a shift in the types of people that are buying.
Correct.
I think if you were a sharp with a lot of money, and I use this as a metaphor, I have no idea if he's in the contest. Like Billy Walters, right? Best sports bettor ever, sports betting Hall of Fame, right? I don't think he shows up to buy $1,000 entry for $800 because it's cheap. It's just not worth his time.
Sure.
It wouldn't matter. If you told me this entry is worth $1 million and he's buying it for $600,000, maybe that's worth his time. Maybe not. I don't know. But it's certainly more likely to be worth his time, right? Sure. And he could buy 10 of those. He could buy $10 million in entries for $6 million or something. And, you end up, it's just a different buyer. Whereas the typical buyer that was buying things for $1,200, $1,400, they're unlikely to show up and buy these $1 million entries for $600,000. So you're going to see a shift in the buyers. And I still stand by, you're going to start seeing discounts as these things approach 6 figures and beyond. I do think over time, over the years to come, those discounts will compress. Because you're going to get more people that have a lot of money that are sharps, that understand the value, that can afford, even with 100 people and knowing they're only going to win 1 in 60 times if they're better than the field, 1 in 80 times. But by the time they're 100, there's only so much better you can be. But they'll still understand the value and they'll buy them at big discounts, but they'll be willing to compress the discounts. Big right now might be 40%. Big in 3 years might be 5%. You're just trying to pick up that extra $50,000 in equity. So it's going to be interesting, and it's been fun watching the marketplace develop, watching it shift, watching even the people over at Circa, they're aware of it. They've made comments from time to time, go talk to Survivor Sweat. And the stuff is, it's just really cool. I actually, and I believe this, and I said this over to the guys at Circa, it's impossible, or not impossible, incredibly difficult to prove. I actually think the Survivor Sweat marketplace, it's very self-serving, but I believe it actually helped increase the numbers at Circa this year.
Agreed. Because
I think you've got people that look at this and go, okay, this is going to be fun. It's $1,000 or $5,000, however many entries I'm buying. But the chances I'm really going to make it all the way to the end are pretty low. And so I'd be thrilled if I could make 50 grand, or somebody might say I'm thrilled if I make 100 grand or 20 grand. But before it was 14 million or bust. Now in theory, they could make 30 grand. So I think it encourages people to say, okay, you know what? I'll take the flyer and the $1,000 because I don't have to. If you were playing the main event of the World Series and it was literally winner take all, I think the fields are a lot smaller.
Agreed.
You're going to sit down and put up 10,000 and, you got to play against some bad players and then the best in the world. And you can make a final table finish third and get 0, right? I mean, it's just, you're not going to get as many players. So I think it changes the dynamic. You increase the field. And I think there's going to be more activity this week. I think this could be a sweet spot between last week, this week, maybe next week. Depending on what happens. And then I think you'll get, from the Survivor Sweat standpoint, you'll have larger sales later, but I doubt there'll be as many sales later. I mean, by definition, there won't be as many entries to be available. How many did you say were in listings in the marketplace now?
Well said. Before jumping onto the pod, there were between 45 and 50 entries on the marketplace, ranging between $515, cheap enough for 1%, up to $50K for 90%. It also gives you the pricing per percentage, so it shows you the value of the entry. Last sale was $1,500 for 3%. The average entry value is $30,000.
And the thing here again, that it's about 10% of the entire field is out there in Survivor Sweat. Yeah, for sale, which is pretty cool. Some people ask us, I believe, if you buy a pick, or if you buy a percentage, who makes the pick? And, it's like the standard lawyer answer, well, it depends. And if you look up on the marketplace, you'll see if they're selling the rights to make the pick or they keep making the pick. So it's not in a vacuum. I believe in theory, although it'd be unlikely this would happen, in theory, someone could buy 90% of a pick and the guy that still owns 10% could be the one making it.
Sure.
Or in theory, somebody could just sell 10% of the pick and go, I don't want to make it. Right. And we've had people approach us to ask if we'd sell picks. And there are people that said, they may want to buy 80% of us, but they want us to keep making the picks. Right. And that we're not really sellers at this point. But it really can go either way. So you just need to take a close look and figure out what it is you're trying to do. Are you trying to make the picks? Are you trying to, maybe if some of these things sold at small discounts, maybe you're taking, 2, 3, 5% of 10 or 20 of these things.
Yeah.
And hoping one of them pans out.
There was another question. It's if you buy 10% of an entry, can you sell that 10% later on down the line?
Yeah, you buy it, you own it, right? So you can pretty much do what you want. Now, again, if you buy 10% of an entry, you're very unlikely to be making the picks. So when you sell it, you're selling it without the ability to make the picks. Again, self-serving, but I'm going to say it's pretty obvious. If you buy it through Survivor Sweat, you should sell it through Survivor Sweat. And I say this not just for the obvious reason, but because Survivor Sweat's already going to understand what percentage you own because they sold it to you. They're going to understand who's making the picks, whether it's you or not you. You don't want to be in a spot where, particularly if you're buying a 10% interest from somebody that bought it from somewhere else, and then you're thinking that you're buying something you're not. You're thinking that maybe you're making the picks when you're not. Just keep in mind whatever percentage you do own. So if you buy 10%, sell off 9 of it, still own 1. Whatever percentage you still own, if this thing wins, you do need to show up at Circa and fill out the tax forms to get paid, whether it's 1% or 99%. And it's going to say that in your agreements. But I know Circa is very, very sensitive to that. They want to make sure they know who is getting paid. And you all have to show up at the same time, on the same day. I wish they would tweak that, but maybe one day. But for now, everybody must show up in person. So just keep in mind, if you're owning a small piece, of course, you own 1% of 14 million. It's still plenty, 140 grand, you're going to show up. But if there's then a deal made and, now the next thing you know with everything else you own, especially if you're trying to own less than 1%, and then you're owed $2,000 and you got to get here from Philly or something, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. So I know the team has tried to reach out to everyone who has tweeted. Just make sure that your settings aren't locked and that your tweet replies are turned on.
Yeah, we had some people why aren't you replying? I'm asking these questions. We're trying, but you've got your replies turned off, so we can't actually reply to you. So we've tried to find other ways where maybe someone will reply in a similar thread or something, hoping you see it. But yeah, make sure that they are turned on, your DMs are turned on, or whatever it is you need to do.
Yeah, so if you have any further questions, reach out to us, reach out to the Survivor Sweat team. We'll try to answer them to the best of our abilities. If not, we'll find the answers for you. We'll get that done. You can reach out to Rosenblum R, Mike Buckmiller. We'll do our best to get your questions answered, maybe have them right here on the pod. Don't forget to like us, subscribe, give us feedback. We love the community. We love the contest. Man, 480 left. If you're not in, get back in.
And actually you should, and we've talked about this in the past, and again, somewhat self-serving, but it's true. If you can get 1% of an entry, even if it's at a markup and you're paying a few $100s extra, it kind of at least gets you in and you can sort of get a feel for what's going on. So next year you can make a decision if you actually want to buy in, buy 1 entry, buy 10 entries, whatever. Or as I've noted in the past, if you're looking at dollars that you think are too high, you should get some friends and some partners and get in together, which is just more fun anyway. Something actually we should reach out to the people over there in the marketplace. They should try to put something together it's almost like a Survivor Personals, looking for partners.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm looking, maybe you're looking to, you understand the entries are going to be $100,000 to buy and you've got 15,000, looking for partners and I'm the one that makes picks or whatever. But at least it might help people kind of get together to do this. And because at the end of the day, the seller doesn't care. I just want to get the money.
I like that idea. It's great. Yeah. Wonderful community. Glad everybody is listening to the pod. And hey, like I said, reach out to us. We love this contest. Greatest contest in the world. Again, 480 left.
It's going to be an even better contest if we win it again.
A winner take all, 14.266 million.
It's not bad.
Not bad. Get a proxy. Get your picks in.
No picks. I like those no picks.
And hit us up.
All right.
Survive and see you next week.
See you next week.
Looking for Survivor strategy articles? Did you lose your last entry on a Survivor contest and wish you could rebuy? Check out our marketplace and you may find what you need. Head over to survivorsweat.com for all things Survivor. And we'll see you next week for the next Survivor Sweat podcast.